Hello, hello! It's Brandi's world. Okay, today we are continuing our series of looking at a podcast about, let's just give it their title. This is going to be season 1, episode 3 of, I think there's like 8 parts in this season, and there's 2 seasons. I think there's at least 13 shows. So, thus far. Okay, so this episode is titled Premiere. It's the premiere episode. Premiere, Gender Chaos in America, have schools become, quote, indoctrination centers for gender ideology, unquote. Oh, goodness. Okay. So let's give a quick description. If you didn't tune into the first episode where I look at the introduction to this podcast, go back and check that out. And they kind of they lay out their cards of what they're doing. Okay, so this is hosted by Brandon Showalter, a journalist with the Christian Post. He has spent years covering the development of the so-called gender identity movement. In this 5-part investigative podcast series, he'll take you through parents' heartbreaking stories. He'll also explore the chaotic state of our education system in the United States and the overly sinister actions and craving cowardice of our institutions. Woo! Some strong words there put out there for Brandon. Okay. In this inaugural episode, we'll specifically tackle how some of our schools have become indoctrination centers for gender ideology and the dire impact this is having on families. We'll cover the harrowing journey of January Littlejohn, a mother from Florida whose daughter's own experience with gender confusion and her school's purported reaction having sparked her to action. We'll also hear from attorneys, school board members, parent advocates, and other experts. And other experts who have deep concerns over where this movement is taking us. This is, quote, gender indoctrination, unquote. And then they offer like some links. You can listen to more from Christian Post. Ooh, goodness. All right. So, let's get into this. Wow.
You know, I've heard people compare this ideology to a cult, which I definitely see a lot of cult character traits in this. I've heard people.
Wow, we are starting off hot already. So he's just blasting out some quote from some lady saying, well, I'm listening to this fresh with y'all. I haven't listened to this series yet. We're going to go through this together. And woo. Okay. So right away, being compared to a cult. Okay. And I don't think they're talking about religion because those are pretty good comparisons. I guess on scale, they're a little bit different. But, but let's try to figure out how being transgender is cultish. Okay.
People compare this to the fascism and totalitarianism movements that we've seen in the past, and I think there's a lot of that in it, but ultimately
I would love for them to be a little more specific with the it they're talking about. I can guess here. And I believe the it would be transgender people existing, right? Yes.
And totalitarianism movements that we've seen in the past. And I think
Totalitarian movements that we have seen in the past. Totalitarian movements. What could they be talking about? I think she's talking about things like they want to bring to mind Mussolini's movements, Hitler's movement, other big movements that were very harmful to societies. Ooh. Let's listen some more.
there's a lot of that in it, but ultimately this is even bigger than any of those things, because this isn't happening in one cult community, this isn't happening in one state, it's not happening in one country, it's not happening on one continent even. This is global.
The transgender craze is growing and metastasizing in America and
The transgender movement is growing and metastasizing in America. Let's break down that sentence for a minute. My goodness. The transgender movement, what does that mean? That means, I think, socially moving in from the shadows, maybe, and moving into a spotlight, saying, hey, look, society, we exist and we're part of you. Is that the movement? Because that's my goal. My goal as a transgender person and as a transgender activist, I clearly have two goals. These two goals are, so this is my movement. I want two things. One, equality. Two, normality. That's what I'm asking for. I am asking for equality and normality within society. I can live myself, the person I am, I can express that. That is what you are seeing, my expression. I'm expressing who I am. When I close my eyes and I think about the me in me, the innate me, that essence of Brandi, that essence that is me, I want to express that. And that is what my expression is. That is me transitioning from being labeled and put into a binary box of gender and realizing and discovering that my inner self does not align with that binary gender of the box I was assigned. But it happens, myself happens to align pretty nicely with our gender concepts of the box B in this binary system, right? So I didn't align or fit with that box when I look inward and try to express that. That expression that doesn't feel right. I mean, I could play the part, but that doesn't feel right. It was never comfortable trying to fit into that gender assigned box. Right? Does that make sense? So when I discovered my gender identity, I wanted to express it. And that's the part of me that's transgender. I'm expressing my inner self. And that expression does not align with the labeled box given to me or assigned to me. I express, and it happens to reflect and look nicely fit into box B of our society. I am being me. I'm expressing myself. I'm expressing who I am on the inside, and it happens to fit into box B. So therefore, I transition my gender expression from box A to box B in our binary gender labeled system, right? Okay. So apparently that is bad according to these people. Expression of yourself. Let's continue.
across the world Confusion is abounding.
Unity, this isn't happening in one state. It's not happening in one country. It's not happening on one continent even. This is global.
Yeah, the this is people are expressing themselves. What I just explained. There are people all over the globe that are also going, hey, I don't fit into this binary box system. I don't fit into that box. I express that. And you know what? I live in a society where I should be able to have a voice about my expression as well. This is who I am. I'm expressing myself. How are you doing? Who are you? What are your passions and how do you express yourself? That is that is the problem here. Myself and people like me are standing on a box in our society and saying, I exist. We are standing on whatever platform we are able to manage to get onto. And standing from that platform saying, I exist. And there are people like me. In fact, as this lady said, there are people all over the globe who are like me, who were assigned a gender at birth, and that gender assignment does not fit with their inner identity, with their gender identity, so they express themselves. And that's what these people are battling against. They do not want us to either exist or either express ourselves. In either way, I see those as synonyms. I see those as same almost. If I could not express myself, if I cannot express myself, what is the point of being me? What is the point of my life? I was uncomfortable in my skin for most of my life because I did not realize or discover my gender identity until I was in my 40s. And expressing that identity, it is worth all the crap that society is trying to dump on me and people like me. Because I don't think I could jam myself back into that assigned box. I would never be comfortable in that box again. I never was comfortable. I never will be comfortable. I cannot go back into a box that was assigned to me based on sexual characteristics, because my gender identity is not my sexual characteristics. Those are different. My gender identity is within me. It's not my genitals. But I digress. Let's continue.
Transgender craze is growing and metastasizing in America and across.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Metastasizing in America. That means consuming and eating from the inside out. Metastasizing does not sound good. That sounds like a cancer in someone's bones is trying to maw its way out. Who wants that? That doesn't even sound human. That's scary language that person is using right there. Metastasizing. My existence is metastasizing in America, according to this person. Think about that. We've heard this type of language against minority groups of people in our country before. And that is scary back then, and it's scary now.
World. Confusion is abounding. And while Western cultures celebrate and elevate it, the costs are quickly mounting. From a loss of parental rights to botched and destroyed young lives, this movement leaves little room for apathy.
This movement leaves little room for apathy. This person in this mindset does not even want to be empathetic or look at a solution for going forward with me existing. He has no apathy for my existence or people like me. or my expression of my existence. My expression of my identity is a problem for this guy that apparently is metastasizing America. That is effing scary, people.
I'm Brandon Showalter, a journalist with the Christian Post, and in the last few years I've been covering the developments of the so-called gender identity movement. In this 5-part investigative podcast series, we'll take you through parents' heartbreaking stories. We'll explore the chaotic state of our education system in the United States and the overtly sinister actions and craven cowardice of our institutions. We'll also explore the history of how we got to where we are and so much more.
Whoa, there's so much more. After you run me over with a truck, and then you drag me some more down the road, and then some more? Wow. All right, I don't need to rehash all that. I read it out. You heard it. It's like this podcast, I mean, we're just getting started. And to me, it already reminds me of old-timey scary monster movies. Remember, like back in the 40s and 30s, they would portray like Dracula or Frankenstein or some of these scary cultural monsters, and they would follow the monster around with the camera. So you're seeing the world from the monster's view, so to speak. And I found that very frightening, because it's like, oh, no, as the camera is, as you in the fourth wall of the program, you're trying to say, let's turn, let's go in a different direction. Let's not harm all these people. Like, in a way, kind of, it's like Frankenstein's monster, because Frankenstein was the guy, the doctor who put the corpse together and electrified it, right? So Frankenstein's monster, when it walks through the village, it has no concept of it is going to be frightening to people because it exists. It has no concept that it is going to scare or terrify the town because it is interacting within that society. It's interesting that we're seeing these monstrous actions that are really deeply rooted in ignorance and predetermined biases, which create harsh prejudices. So it turns into bigotry. And that's what we're kind of looking at. We're looking at some bigot monsters, people, is what I'm getting at. We're going to be right over the shoulder of these bigoted monsters talking about how they want to stifle and push back and dehumanize a group of Americans, because they're not really talking about outside of America. So let's stick with America. I'm an American. My family has been American as long as there's been America. In fact, my family was in the New Mexico territory for 100 years before that became part of America. So kind of long-term American here. And being trans does not take away from being American. And it does not take away from being granted American rights and American privileges. Why should I miss out on American privileges because I'm expressing who I am? And I'm an American. So let's go back to this, following these monsters around, trying to target transgender people.
This inaugural episode, we'll tackle how some of our schools have become indoctrination centers for gender ideology and the dire impact that this is having on families. We'll begin with January Littlejohn, a mother from Florida, whose harrowing story I learned about last year. January, if we could, just to begin here, explain how you as a mom down in Florida first encountered this gender ideology in the schools. What happened with your family?
Absolutely. So at the height of the pandemic, my daughter told my husband and myself that she was experiencing confusion over her sex.
Okay. this reminds me, like, a lot of in these people's mindset, they're going to be like, pronouns are going to be a big issue. Listen for this. I know this is going to be coming. Like, you can get out bingo cards and go, how are they going to bash trans people? Okay, let's talk about pronouns and pretend that there's only one assignment for a pronoun, and once you're assigned that pronoun, you better not take that label off. You better not try to use a different pronoun, because it might confuse me, and I don't want to be confused. So you're going to use the pronoun I'm going to think that I should say to you. There's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of forcing pronouns onto people. So trigger warning, I guess. Beware of that. 3 times this January Littlefoot, is her name? Littlejohn, I'm sorry. January Littlejohn, a lady from Florida, their child came to them. So we're starting to follow their story real quick. And even notice that, hopefully, we'll see if we get to hear from the child and see what the child has to say about this situation. But according to January Littlejohn, their child is confused about their sex. Yeah. Sex can be confusing. We should do a thing of talking about sex next time, Little John. But in this issue, we're supposed to be talking about gender. So, sex, not gender. Gender, not sex. 2 different concepts. Okay? Many times they align with each other, but not always. So, alright. Confused about sex? Fair. Sex is confusing.
This was after 3 friends in her in-person peer group at school had also suddenly started claiming a trans identity.
Oh, so the child's in a peer group.
And so we were immediately concerned, completely caught off guard. My daughter had never experienced distress over her sex leading up to this announcement.
Okay, yeah, so let me back up there. So the child has friends. Maybe they're long childhood friends, or maybe they got into a peer group is what they've said. So it doesn't sound like, hey, my child went down the street to their friend that they played with since they were 2 or 5 or whatever. No, in school, they went to a peer group. Those peer groups are usually 5 to 10 people in those groups, especially at school meetings like that. So let's say maybe 15 kids are in this peer group, and 3 of them have said that they are trans. So maybe that group might be a trans support and allied support group. That would be awesome. I hope those exist at schools. They should exist at schools. I know at my college we had peer groups that were for supporting people like that. It was great. So I'm guessing this child is in a peer group that is in trans positive or trans accepting or trans allied or just a trans group. Okay? And within that group, they're like, oh, this is interesting. These people are saying that. You know, I'm confused about what's going on with my sex. So I'm assuming that means that the gender and the sex aren't really aligning like society say they should align. Well, I don't know. But the mother says the child has confusion. Fair. And in a group with trans people. So they're thinking about trans, if not supporting trans, or who knows, maybe they're just like being around trans people. Let's find out. And like many teens during this time of the schools shut down in the height of the pandemic, she was experiencing anxiety and stress like many of the other teens in these situations. When school started, after a few weeks into school, my daughter got into the car and told me she had a meeting with school officials where they asked her which restroom she wanted to use. It's a teenage student, and they asked them, would you like to pee or poop in bathroom A or bathroom B? We kind of still segregate them, so yeah, we're still playing the binary system. I know. All you students are ready for a spectrum and a all genders restroom because with stalls it doesn't matter. But okay. So, student, teenager, would you feel more comfortable in this bathroom that is designated to people who identify as girls, because they're all teenagers, or this bathroom where it is designated for all the people who identify as boys? Because we can't see your identity as school officials, so I think it's best for a school official to try to inquire. So we'll ask you. We accept transgender people as humans here at our school, and we would like them to feel comfortable when they pee or poo. You are part of a group that has transgender people or transgender activists, so we're asking probably those people in those groups, and maybe all the students, who knows how many students they're asking, but they're going, hey, look, would you feel more comfortable in the boys or the girls? Because, you're the one who's peeing and pooping, letting you have a choice and not forcing you to go into one or the other that you may not feel comfortable in. So, oh wait, we didn't hear the mother's reaction, but we can guess it. It's going to be, whew, they're really raising my child right over there at the school. They're teaching her that choices are valuable and that your self-identity is valuable and that you decide for the rest of your life where you're going to be comfortable peeing and pooping. Wow, what a novel concept for a school to do. I'm sure this parent is going to be very supportive. Let's hear what Miss January Littlejohn has to say.
Now, my husband and I both knew that she wanted to go by a different name.
Whoa! You just dropped that bomb on us now I'm positive that you are freaking identifying your child. So they knew that. We know that child of theirs wants to use pronouns that were not assigned to them and a name that was not assigned to them. They want to express the name they feel comfortable using and being called and interacting with society with, and the pronouns that they feel comfortable interacting with society and using and accepting when they interact with people around them.
Different pronouns, but we were working with a mental health professional, and we thought, given the other mental health issues she was experiencing at the time, that needed to be our focus.
Other mental issues, didn't they mention that anxiety? Was that the mental issue that they're experiencing? Okay, so let's not think about treatments for a child as long as they have other issues such as anxiety. I had anxiety my entire childhood. I had depression my entire childhood. So I should never get any treatments for anything as a child because I have those mental issues of anxiety and depression. I still have them. I still deserve treatments for other parts of me.
January and her husband were understandably angry after finding out about this meeting. But when they called the school, she said administrators told her that they couldn't give them any information and that their daughter, who was 13 at the time, would need to authorize her parents' notification. That's
At 13, I think that sounds fair. I think that is a good measure to protect children. Think about it. What else a child might be in danger of? Abuse, right? And where is abuse most likely to happen on a child? With people they know and trust and love. In the home is the most abusive place for a child. And if a child is being abused at that home, they should feel that they can have an outlet to go to some kind of help that may listen and step up and advocate for them. And shouldn't that be a school where we have trained professionals who are trained in that specific thing to advocate for the child's best interest? If that child is being abused, don't you want them to be able to go to that counselor, that trusted teacher, that trusted administrator of the school and say, I'm in danger, I'm being abused, I'm hurting, I need help? And what if that school professional would say, I see, I hear you, and I want to help. First, we're going to call your parents and see what they have to say about the situation. Oh. We'll call them right now. Let's see how that's going to go when we call this abusive parent to tell them that their child has just narked them out. Yeah, you know your 13-year-old child. Oh, yeah, apparently there's been some harm at the home. Oh, you don't want us to talk about that? You're in more control than us, and since you're the parent, whatever you say is going to be the way it is, and I should shut my mouth as a school administrator and a school professional and an advocate for the child? You're the only advocate for the child? Maybe it would go something like that. Do you think? Childhood suicide, teenage suicide, if you break it into groups of people, which group is the highest at risk for suicide, for death by suicide? It is transgender children. That is a danger. Don't we want to curb that? And it is solvable. We can lower that rate dramatically, because the main issue with the suicide of transgender people is the way they are dehumanized and the way that they are denied their expression of who they are by people around them, by people they trust and people they love. When they are denied to be them, when they are denied to express who they are, when they are denied to even question who they are. It is not hard to recognize why so many transgender children die by suicide. It is not what is inside them that is killing them. The nonsense around them, the ignorance, the lack of understanding, and the lack of support around them, which elevates the suicide rate in transgender children. Okay, let's continue.
In January, started pushing even harder for answers.
I was floored when they told me this. So they told me my only recourse was to contact the assistant superintendent at the district, which I did. And after many weeks of going back and forth with the district, we finally were able to get a meeting with the principal of the middle school, because my daughter was only 13 at the time. And we were shown a transgender, gender non-conforming support plan.
The school has a support plan. Support, that's great. But I'm guessing that Miss Littlejohn here, or I'm assuming it's Mrs. Littlejohn, is not going to think that is great to support children who happen to be trans.
That was completed with our 13-year-old daughter without our knowledge or consent. This was a 6-page document completed with her behind closed doors that included the guidance counselor, the assistant principal, and a social worker I had never met. And in this guide, they asked her questions that could have absolutely significantly impacted her safety, such as which restroom she preferred to use.
Yes! Didn't I already go through that? you would feel safer and more comfortable in the restroom that you would like to use. Oh my goodness, people, the bathroom issue is so frustrating. Transgender people they're not the dangerous ones in those bathrooms. They're the ones who are in danger in those bathrooms. It's so weird. Oh, goodness.
And which sex she preferred to room with on overnight field trips, in addition to being allowed to change her name and pronouns.
That school is saying, I hear you, student. We recognize that you prefer pronouns X and you prefer name Y. We are going to accommodate that because, yeah, of course, that's the least we could do. We could accommodate you being who you want to be, and we could recognize that. And we can say, oh, you're expressing yourself, and that expression aligns with pronouns X and aligns with name Y. And we will use name Y and we will use pronouns X because as professionals in a school advocating for children and students, you're a student and a child, and we're advocating for your right to express who you are. What if the issue was left-handedness? I mean, I'm kind of surprised the Christians aren't still on that thing. I can show you there are a few places in their favorite book that talk about how left-handedness is of the devil and is evil. And why should you even risk that? If you think there's such a thing as a devil and a place called a hell that you are going to be in for millions or billions or trillions of years or whatever, yeah, isn't that kind of scary for you in your worldview? Left-handedness, unless you are rewriting your book, left-handedness is of the devil. And if your child tries to be left-handed, should they have that choice or should you make that choice for them? When your child goes to school, are you pissed off if the teacher puts a pencil in the middle of the desk and says, grab whichever hand you feel more comfortable grabbing that pencil with? Would you get pissed off at them and say, that is not a decision for my child to make? I make the decisions whether my child is left-handed or right-handed. I make the decisions whether my child expresses their inner identity or not. I make those decisions. That is what these people are saying. Now, because as society, we pushed left-handedness being of the devil as nonsense that we don't even think about it anymore. Oh, look at that left-hander. He probably has a beautiful curveball if he pitches. Oh, I love the way those left-handed people throw the football. Oh, look at that left-handed serve. How beautiful is that? Our society doesn't consider that of the devil anymore. But handedness is also innate and you can express it. You are expressing yourself. If both of my arms were removed from me surgically, would I stop being the handedness that I am? No. Take both of those hands, I still dominate with one over the other. Because it's innate within me. As is my identity of my gender concept, me. Inside of me, I'm expressing. This is not exactly how I envision myself, but pretty damn close. I have the freedom to express myself because I'm not being oppressed by a parental unit bashing down on me to say, you should not express yourself because I say you should not express yourself. What happens when that child is 18? Are you hoping you brainwash them enough that they're going to say, oh, I really want to express who I am, and when I close my eyes, I see an inner self, and it would be nice to express that, but I was told that I would be less than if I do that. I don't want to be less than in the eyes of people around me, so I am not going to tap into that. I am not going to express that. That is the existence that Mrs. Littlejohn wants their child, and many other people who believe that this binary thing comes from up on high, and an almighty creator said, here's a rule, boy and girl, and don't mix them up. Oh, God, we can get over this too. You can get over this binary bullshit of genderness. Gender's on a spectrum. Gender is from within, and you can express it and you can perform it. In fact, you do. Every single day you express your gender. Every single day you perform your gender. In the way you dress, in the way you do your hair, in the way you present your body, in the way you walk, in the way you talk, in the way you interact with society. You are expressing and performing your gender identity. But you don't want children to do that or have that same luxury, the same privilege, or, let me dare to say it, the same right to express who they are and the gender that they are. You want them to obey and perform a gender that does not align with their inner identity, and you want them to shut the F up about expressing how they feel about themselves. And you want people who actually express themselves to shut the F up and not talk to anyone else. Too late for that. I'm talking. All right, so I got a little bit worked up. Here we go.
Plan also directs school staff. They essentially put the burden on the minor child, not only to determine whether or not parents will be included in these meetings, which is essentially social transitioning of a child, but it also directed school staff to use my daughter's birth name and pronouns when speaking to us, her parents, and to use a different name in school with staff, students, and friends.
Oof. So the school is saying, look, when your child is here, we will respect their autonomy and respect the right to their right to express themselves. And when you are around, we will respect your right to dominate over your child and use a pronoun and a name that you decided is better for them, and regardless of how they feel or they told you. They have also told you. Remember, it came out of your mouth, Mrs. Littlejohn, January. You said that your child came to you and your husband and informed you so that you know that they prefer other pronouns than you keep using, and a different name than you assigned and you keep using. Just because you assign the gender box at birth and you assign the name at birth doesn't mean that you dictate control and you can mold and mash that stuff for the rest of their life. Yeah, legally until they're 18, you can do lots of things in this country to your child before they're 18. I've seen it. It's sad. It's sad how parents treat these humans that are soon going to be within society without their parents holding them. These children will grow up. Your child, Mrs. Littlejohn, and other children, their friends, are going to grow up. And I hope that they're able to express themselves as an adult. I hope they recognize that they have the right, the privilege, and as an American, they have the freedom to express who they are. Because if you don't have the freedom to express who you are, What does it mean to be an American? I thought that was at the core. Is it? For me, it is. All right.
So that essentially, we would never even have known this meeting had taken place. They are colluding and collaborating with minor children to exclude parents from these critical decisions that will impact their health and well-being at school.
Many may wonder how in the world such a scenario could happen in which schools circumvent parents in this way. So I asked attorney Bernadette Broyles, who represents the Littlejohn family, how is this even legal?
It's not. And that's why we filed a federal lawsuit, and there are lawsuits that are beginning to be.
I think there's a lot more minutia than it's not. Let's say that a child, let's take the Littlejohns out of it. Let's say child X is being abused at home, and there are different forms of abuse. Maybe they're being psychologically abused. Maybe they're being physically abused. Maybe they're being sexually abused. I don't know. All of those abuses are not okay. Any abuse is not okay to put onto humans. It's not that hard, people. Humans should not be abused, especially the young ones, the little ones. Don't abuse them. And that abused child X goes to the school and says, I being emotionally and psychologically abused because I'm trying to express who I am, and that is being stifled, and that I am being threatened if I don't stop trying to express myself. What if a child came and said that to a school professional? I hope that school professional has a meeting with people, get together and go, this is what's going on. Let's write this up. Let's not include the possible perpetrators in the harm to the child in this meeting, because, wow, that's weird. Let's assess and see what's going on. And maybe there is something that we have to keep from those parental units. Maybe that's a good thing sometimes. Just because you're a parent doesn't mean that you are free from harming people or harming even your own child. That's where most of the harm comes from. Those are safety measures for the child, that the child can go to a school and say, I'm in danger. I feel threatened. I cannot be myself at home. I am scared. That sounds scary. Not to be able to express who you are in the place you reside. That is scary. I digress. Here we go. Let's listen to some more. I think they're talking with the lawyer now.
Be filed in states around the country, and it's demonstrably not legal in the state of Florida. Number one, well, throughout the country, the Supreme Court of the United States has for many decades recognized a constitutional liberty interest and right for parents to be able to direct the upbringing, mental health care, medical care, education, religious training of their children without state interference. That's long established law. Even under Florida Constitution, the parents again had a Florida constitutional right to direct the upbringing of the parents. So it is not legal.
I love when they hide like moral atrocities against people behind a legal law, because it's a legal law. So obviously as a country we decided that since it's a law that everyone should just follow that law because it's the moral thing to do. Well, guess what? People hid behind laws to abuse people. Okay, does anyone remember Jim Crow laws? They stood behind Jim Crow laws to abuse American citizens in this country for many years and decades. Jim Crow laws were not moral or not good or should not even been laws. Just because they're laws in our country doesn't mean that they're morally superior and that they stand above the rights of humans. And that's what I'm getting at. To be not abused should not be stifled by a vague little veneer of a law that's going to protect an abuser. We need to change those laws. If laws are protecting the perpetrator from child abuse, let's change those laws. Let's not make it easier for people to abuse children more. Come on.
And what the activists are doing is attempting to operate underneath the radar and be doing these things without parents knowing about it in hopes that they don't find out about it. And once they do, then they're attempting to distort federal law to say that the federal law creates a privacy right in children against their own parents. That is not the law.
January Littlejohn's situation is, unfortunately, not an isolated one. Parents around the country are now finding themselves locked in contentious battles with individual schools and district officials as they navigate this gender crisis. Tiffany Justice, who's
Okay, they're getting into another story. So I think we're going to stop with January Littlejohn's story and their child. Did you notice that we never heard from the child again? We only advocating for the child came out from the parent was the child expressed to both the parents and the school that they have preferred name and a preferred pronoun that they would prefer to use because that identifies with them. And the parent, the monster we're following around in this podcast, was just right there and they couldn't quite get it. They couldn't quite get that their child was trying to express to them, I need love and support, and I'm only getting it from the school right now. I'm not going to say only because I'm sure they get love and support at their home in situations, but at the core of it, support for whom? For support for whom? If they're not going to let their child be the identity that they are inside of them, if they're not going to let them be the handedness that they are inside of them, who are they advocating for? Let the child be the child. At 13, that child could use whatever pronoun they feel more comfortable with. At 13, that child should use whichever name they feel represents them throughout society best to their identity. My parents didn't give me the name Brandi Beckett. But that is the name for me. That is the name I interact with society with because it is me. Way more than my dead name. It's me. I'm Brandi. And I'm sad that little John's child doesn't appear to be able to be them, at least not at home. And I applaud that school. Thank you, professional school teachers and counselors and administrators who advocate for children to express who they are. I applaud you. That is awesome. I think we're going to close out this part of the episode. We'll continue. We'll continue soon, so tune in. I'll bring another episode. We're going to look at the second half of episode 3 of season 1. It's the premiere episode of this. They called it a docuseries. It's more like following a monster around and going, what do you think, monster? What do you think? Oh, goodness. We're going to have some fun with this, people. And we're going to be sad. And there's going to be trigger warnings. I'm going to put trigger warnings right at the beginning of this. It looks like, my goodness, this is going to cause some trigger warnings listening to this show. Like yourself and treat people the way they want to be treated. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.